You got your Mac guys here on Bird 365. John McMullen Jody McDonald. A quasi-Mac joined us. He looks like a Mac to me. Ed Kracz, Johnny's running mate at Sports Illustrated. Good enough to hop on. All right, here's where I'm going first. And this is for both of you two guys, but you specifically, Ed, because I know you posted about it, I think, on Sunday on your sisite.com. But I'm going to use a John McMullen phrase here, the mercenary market. They're not really going to bring back Desean Jackson at midseason, are they? Desean went on some podcast somewhere and said, "Oh, I'd love to go back and play. That's where I've had my most success. And I could do the Ndamukong Suh thing, like John has termed them, the mercenary market, in-season ring-chasing group." They're not really going to go there with Desean again, are they?
Well, listen, I don't think you can rule it out. If he stays in shape and he does all the right things during this period of inactivity for him, then who knows? You just don't know the twists and turns that a season's going to take. I mean, we would have been shocked if we talked about Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph joining the team last May. They finally did join in November, but we would have been laughed at if we were talking about them joining in May like we were doing here with Desean. But I think the Eagles receiving group is, kind of thread thin here. After AJ and Devontae, it's kind of a mishmash of guys. I mean, I know they brought in Olamide Zaccheaus, and, they have him and they have Quez still on the roster, but it's a pretty thin group. Britton Covey, Devin Allen, maybe Devin Allen takes a step up. Devin Allen was at rookie camp in the early part of May. So, we'll see. If something were to happen to Smith or Brown, from an injury standpoint, I don't think you can rule out DeSean Jackson if, like I said, he's doing the right things and he's staying in shape.
Yeah, I'm hoping Olamide takes over because I've learned how to say his name, much like Halapuli Bati. I'm hoping Halapuli Bati comes back, just for that reason.
Well, he's playing for that juggernaut Detroit Lions now. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah. Jeff Stoutland got him paid. He should get some residual checks for developing Halapuli Bati. When it comes to Desean, though, I mean, is he going to show up and play 3 plays and strain the hamstring? I think you're right from this perspective, Ed. Injuries occur. Everything's on the table. Barring injuries, I would think they would want to go in a different direction when it comes to that particular player.
I would agree with that. But listen, if the Eagles are sitting there at 6-0 and you lose AJ Brown in week 7, then the whole dynamic changes, and you wonder maybe it's 3 games and out with a hamstring injury for Desean, but you don't know that until you were to bring him in and see what he has left. And again, I think it would be a desperation move. I don't think they're going to bring him in August to be the punt returner over Britton Covey, but again. He could be in play should something calamitous happen, in the first month or so of the season.
By the way, as an extension of that, real quick, sorry, Jody. Quez Watkins, are you buying that they're still high on him and hoping he has the bounce back, or is that a little bit of lip service? And where are you on the Quez Watkins meter?
Yeah, I think they're I know he's been mentioned as a possible trade candidate, but what are you going to trade him for? You're going to get a late round pick. I mean, at this stage of the year, I think he offers more value being on the roster. I know that his drop in the Super Bowl kind of really put a harsh spotlight on him, and he had a couple plays where that led to interceptions when Gardner Minshew was filling in for those couple games. Maybe Quez didn't fight hard enough for the football on those plays, but if you get rid of Quez Watkins, then you're really thin at the receiver spot. I mean, if you look at this group, it's a cast of who are these guys like Tyree Cleveland and Charleston Rambo, and it gets real thin real fast if you get rid of Quez. So unless you're going to get a second-day draft pick for him, which you won't, he offers more value on this roster than not.
I tend to agree on that one. It's been a while since we had Jan, if I'm not mistaken, since before we heard from the two Eagles coordinators this year, the newbies coming in, replacing Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. I put X amount of stock into what they have to say. I defended Nick Sirianni in his first press gathering when he kind of fumbled and fumbled through it. People wanted to see him fired before he'd ever coached a day here in town. It's his first time. Therefore, I think both Gannon and Desai did pretty well. We all want to read between the lines and think we know what their offense or their defense is going to look like. The side of the ball you're on with Johnson and Desai. Give us your first impressions of the two coordinators. How much stock do you put in what they said, and you just like, yeah, I got to show up because Sports Illustrated is paying me to it. But between you and I don't give a crap till they get out there on the field and actually show me what they're going to do. How do you handle the two new coordinators here in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I think, this roster is good enough to run back to the Super Bowl, right? So I think these two coordinators and how they adjust in their roles is really kind of a under the radar situation for Philadelphia. I mean, we just don't know how Johnson is going to do calling plays, right? He seemed to talk a good game, no pun intended, when he was asked about it. I think John asked him the question about, the play calling and how he thinks he'll do with that. But we don't know until he gets into the fire of a game how he's going to respond. And, Sean Desai, again, Howie did a good job bringing him pieces. I mean, how would you like to be the defensive coordinator that takes over for the first time with a new team and you draft, Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Keely Ringo and Sidney Brown? I mean, that's a pretty good package of players to give you if you're the first-year coordinator. So how he chooses to deploy them, we'll see. I mean, there has been talk that it's going to be a lot of the same principles that Jonathan Gannon had in play, and maybe that will be the case, or maybe Nick will give him free rein to kind of put his own personal stamp on it beyond what Gannon did. So, until we actually see them on the field, and maybe we'll get a glimpse once OTAs begin, and I'm not really sure how much we'll see even there. We're probably going to have to wait until the end of July and August and training camp and the preseason games to kind of get a flavor of how they're going to do. But there's no question that there's a big spotlight on these two guys because this is a roster that, again, on paper, looks like it could make another run to the Super Bowl. But we'll see how the coordinators do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I used that same term, Ed. I said under the radar. And you mentioned spotlight. I think there should be a bigger spotlight because we went through this, right? Super Bowl 52 when the Eagles won. And you remember, new normal. Hey, man, this roster's loaded. They're ready to go back. They're the new Patriots. You had the new normal stuck all over the place on the walls. And they lost Frank Reich and John DeFilippo. Now they're losing the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator. And I think not everybody, but I think a lot of people are like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I don't know if it is going to be fine. I think there should be a bigger spotlight, especially coming off what we just came off. We just saw. And Doug, by the way, as he's proven in Jacksonville, he's pretty good offensive mind himself, but didn't do a great job losing Frank Reich and John. Why isn't this more of an issue? Or not, I shouldn't say issue, but more of
question,
at least an open-minded question.
Yeah, well, I did write about it recently, but, we've touched on this, and you guys, I'm sure, have touched on it since, is that, one of the keys, there were many keys to the Eagles' success last year, and one of them was the fact that they had the same coaching staff coming back from year one under Nick Sirianni to year two. They didn't lose a single person from that staff, and that continuity and those teaching principles really, I think, benefited this team last year. I mean, I thought it was curious when A.J. Brown said last week that, I think it was A.J. Brown, that Brian Johnson's putting his own, or maybe it was Dallas Goedert, but anyway, they said he's putting his own plays and his own route running and his way of running routes and patterns and what they're supposed to look like. Johnson's doing that with this receiving group. So, it's new. It's something that's different. It's something that the Eagles didn't have to go through last year. And remember, the Eagles got a late start to their offseason program this year. Remember, it was a week past everybody else. I think it was April 24th. So they chose not to do that extra week. Now they're starting OTAs on May 30th, which is pretty late. So they're confident that, this is just going to be a well-oiled machine and things are just going to progress the way they did last year. And I'm not so sure that's going to be the case. These coordinators are going to want to do things a certain way, have a certain look to some of the things that they're implementing. And, we'll see if the players can adjust in what is kind of a shorter period of time than most teams are doing.
Ed, when you guys had the chance to talk to the coordinators, you got your group of veterans that you get every single year. They have a couple of guys who have been here before and going to be important guys on the team, get that media session in, and then they won't bother them until after they have to face everybody else. And one of the questions that ran through most everyone was about the Super Bowl hangover, that the records are what the records are. After losing a Super Bowl, it seems to be very difficult to get back there. Chalk it up however you may, Super Bowl hangover, call it what you want. It's just something that doesn't happen very often. Now, Cincinnati went, lost, got back to a championship game, didn't get to a Super Bowl most recent season, but the history is what the history is. They all had kind of different answers how to avoid the Super Bowl hangover. Were you buying? Did you like what you heard from the players? Do you believe we are looking at any kind of a Super Bowl hangover here in Philly this year?
Yeah, I mean, look across the street with the Phillies, right? They went to the World Series, and they're having a hard time. They have a talent
through, yes.
Their roster is very talented, but they're just not clicking. And again, we can see it. It's hard to get back to the Super Bowl and win it after you've just lost it the year before. I mean, only 3 teams have done that. Not to bore you with the historical facts, but it was the 71 Cowboys, the 72 Dolphins, and the 2018 Patriots who were coming off the loss to the Eagles in the Super Bowl the year before. So not an easy thing to do. And there's a reason for that. And many reasons for that. And we'll see if the Eagles can fight their way through it. I thought it was interesting. The players, you're right. They all had something different to say. I thought, leave it to Jason Kelce, the wily veteran here, to kind of put it in the good terms, and that every year is different. It wouldn't matter if the same team came back. Things are still going to be different because it's a different schedule. You're playing teams at different points in the season. You don't know how injuries are going to shake out. Other teams have gotten, they're different as well. So it doesn't matter who's here and who's not from last year. It is a different year. It's a different team. So, how they adjust to whatever a Super Bowl hangover looks like is going to be telling. But, I think they have the veterans in place with Kelce and, Lane Johnson and Kelce, or Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. These are good leaders. And, people think maybe, hey, Fletcher Cox is overpaid. But again, I've always been a staunch believer in that you can't put a price tag on leadership. And this is where guys like Cox and Graham and Kelce and Johnson are going to have to prove leadership and try to keep these guys from suffering that Super Bowl hangover. Maybe they're the, the 2 aspirins and call me in the morning prescription for this team.
By the way, with Bletch, now that I think he's more important this year than he was last year, because at least you had Javon. Now you got a bunch of young guys with Jalen Carter, Jomo, another rookie. Yeah. Even Milton Williams, Marlon Tui Pelotu, they're third-year guys. They haven't been around for a long time. So I think Bletcher's really important this year, to get Jalen Carter up to speed, because I think Jalen Carter's got a chance to be a really, really good player if he can obviously keep his nose clean, mature a little bit. I think he's going to be a home run of a player. So I think Fletcher Cox's role is going to be more important this year than it's ever been. And I think some of those intangibles, maybe people forget a little bit. But I want to talk emergency quarterbacks with you, Ed, because I guess because of obviously because of the NFC Championship game. I've gotten a lot of Eagles fans, maybe you guys, and I'll bring Jody in as well. Maybe you haven't. They took this as some kind of disrespect to the Eagles. We always talk about this. Why is it? Why To me, it's all right. The league is saying we don't want what happened in the championship game. Doesn't matter if it's Philadelphia, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, LA. They just don't want to see a team not have a quarterback in a big spot because they don't want a crap at what that descended into. It's not the Eagles' fault. The Eagles said Hassan Reddick did a tremendous job on the pass rush, and Dominican Sue did a tremendous job. It's not their fault, but they just don't want the situation. Do you guys get that? Have you guys gotten that? Oh, they're picking on the Eagles, because I don't get that
No,
at all.
here's the one thing I saw, and thanks for letting me jump in here, Ed. Here's the only thing I saw on social media. Didn't get a call on it last night. I brought it up on my show on WIP, but I didn't get a call on it. But I saw on social media this morning. Several years ago, when Carson Wentz took the shot in the head early in the playoff game,
Yeah, Seattle. Yeah.
and McCown played with
Torn hamstring.
The torn hamstring. After that happened, nobody made a big deal about, oh, my God, the Eagles got screwed because they didn't have a third quarterback to go to. There was no rule change after that. But it happens to San Francisco 49ers, and oh, my God, we got to reinstate the emergency quarterback. That's the only opinion that I've seen out there as to how the Eagles are being disrespected. When it happened to them a couple of years ago in the playoffs, no movement. It happened to San Francisco, and they changed the rules.
Yeah, but Josh played, by the way, gutty performance. The difference is, first of all, Josh didn't even say anything. That's how gutty Josh McCown is. But he played, and while people say he didn't play well, he played pretty damn effectively, actually. He was an NFL quarterback in the game. So, number one, I think people didn't realize it till after the game, until it came out that he tore his hamstring off the bone. And again, more credit to Josh McCown than anything. Then this time where it was like, all right, and by the way, this is San Francisco's fault. But then the back end of it, guys, is this is a Detroit rule. They're the ones who put it up. 2011, they took it out. Teams should have three quarterbacks, by the way. They should always have three quarterbacks, but they tried to budget. San Francisco got caught. That's their problem. I don't blame the Eagles, but I guess I'm asking, why does this, to me, it's an NFL situation. They don't want that particular situation to happen. And by the way, not because of the teams, because of the TV product. We started the show with the TV product, Jody. We'll get it back in here. Because of the TV, they don't want the NFC Championship game being a dud.
Right.
That, to me, is the thought behind the rule. Ed?
Yeah, well, I can't blame the NFL. I think you should have three quarterbacks active. And however we got here, you can call it the 49ers rule because they couldn't block well enough to keep their two quarterbacks healthy. Or you can call it the Philadelphia Eagles rule. I mean, they're the ones that, made this happen. They're the ones that knocked the quarterbacks out of the game. So, however you want to look at it, I like it. I think that you should have a third quarterback just in case. I mean, the situation rarely arises, but when it does, it's good to know that there's a competent quarterback there. It's not going to be a Christian McCaffrey who was warming up on the sideline in that championship game, or a Greg Ward who Doug Peterson could have turned to probably in 2019. Remember, Nate Sudfeld was on the roster in 2019, but he wasn't active for that game. Had he been available, I'm sure Josh McCown is not playing the 60 snaps that he played in that 2019 playoff game.
I think he might have, by the way. I think he wouldn't have told people and he would have played.
Listen, he was a sitting duck. I mean, I know his numbers were okay. He couldn't put the team in the end zone. He got sacked 6 times. He couldn't move. And that was a detriment.
But Ed, nobody knows he can't move because he can't move.
Right. He already couldn't move, and now he couldn't move even more.
Yes.
But he was 40 years old at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have come clean and admitted to having a torn hamstring off the bone. But
that's just the hunch, obviously. I think he would have played. I think he would have played through it.
Yeah. But the Eagles didn't cry about it. They didn't boo-hoo and, we need a third guy. Like the 49ers did. It's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The 49ers complained. and now they got their wish. But that's okay. I'm okay with that. I think you should have the 3 quarterbacks. The one is the emergency guy who's on the roster, and that's going to be an interesting situation. And once camp starts to heat up for the Eagles, is who's going to be that third guy. You know, they drafted Tanner McKee in the 6th
by
round.
The way,
book there, so we'll see.
The irony of it, did they even have a third quarterback? They didn't have a third quarterback.
San Francisco,
to my knowledge,
did not. No. And I gave their general manager, Mr. Lynch, a hard time for not only not getting someone better than Josh Johnson, they didn't have a third quarterback.
Yeah.
So
Jimmy was still hurt, right? So presumably, if Jimmy was capable of playing, he would have been the backup. I would think, even if it was.
I don't know. Did they have it? I don't know if they had a quarterback on the practice squad at that time.
I don't think they did.
I don't remember.
I don't think they did. They were down because remember, Brock was number 3. Josh would have been number 4. They signed Josh off the street. They didn't even have they would have been the 5th quarterback. So I think it's more to do with we don't want this situation in the NFC Championship.
Yeah. Well, now teams can plan accordingly. I mean, whoever it was, if it was anybody for the 49ers for that game, he wouldn't have been active anyhow.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact is if you're down to your 3rd string emergency type quarterback, I mean, chances of you winning the game have gone from, already slim to probably none if you have already gone through 2 quarterbacks and have to put whoever it is your 3rd guy out there.
Yeah.
I got a strategical question for you, Eddie Kracz. Our buddy Ruben Frank did the homework on this in his Rube's observations, not this week, but the week before, that all 3 of the Eagles' main running backs, and all apologies to Boston Scott because I got 4 guys now, and to our Trey Sermon, although Nick Sirianni might want to tell you how great Trey Sermon is. He's number 5 right now. DeAndre Swift, Kenny Gainwell, and also
Rashad
Penny. All 3 of them in their careers, when they've had 10 carries or more, their yards per carry greatly exceed in games that they have less than 10 carries. When they carry it 10 times or more, a yard and a half more per carry as compared to when they have less, which means they're all good when they get work, when they get into a rhythm, when they get it going. Are they going to try and do that this year? Are they going to try and pick out a guy and have him be the quote-unquote lead guy, or is it going to be shared week in and week out? The numbers were pretty stark. You could look it up in Ruben's column. I don't have it in front of me right now, but all 3 seem to play better when they have a good, solid workload on any given Sunday. How are they going to run those running backs in and out this year, Ed Kracz?
Yeah, I didn't see Ruben's piece. He does a good job with, that type of information. But
stat stuff, yes, he does.
The stat stuff, he does. I'd like to see, and maybe he did. I think all running backs.
Yeah.
Have a higher.
Jody asked me that. Here's my spin on it real quick, Ed. I'm like, it makes sense to me. If you got the hot hand, they give you more. They feed you more. So if you're having a good day, they feed you more. If you're having a bad day, they're like, all right, let's go to the next guy. And the assumption that you're going to get better if you're having a bad day, maybe that's not a great assumption. That's how I take it.
Yeah, I think every running back would say, give me the ball more, and I'm going to be more effective as the game goes on. I understand the Eagles are very analytically driven, so maybe that plays a hand in their thinking going into a game and say, let's get, Penny had a good game last week. Let's ride him again this week. Let's get him to 10-plus carries and, see where he is. But Nick has said in the past, he rides the hot hand. And, Miles Sanders has always been that guy. The Eagles really don't have, to me, a true number one. They have a couple guys that can be the number ones. And I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to ride the hot hand and see who's carrying the ball best. And if it leads to 10 to 15 carries for Penny one week, or Swift the other week, or Gainwell even, we saw Gainwell's role grow last year, then so be it. I mean, I don't know if we'll have 1,000-yard rusher for the Eagles like Miles Sanders did last year, but I think you could see 3 guys with 500-plus yards on the ground.
All right, at Kracz Ed Kracz, follow Ed on Twitter, si.com, /NFL, /Eagles, does a tremendous job Should have stayed out in San Francisco for Super Bowl 60, by the way, Ed. Just stay out there. The Bay Area getting Super Bowl 60. You know, I'll keep it with Jamal Singleton's group since we were just talking about it. End it here with you. Everyone, is it going to be Penny? Is it going to be Swift? Is it going to be Swift? Is it going to be Penny as the lead back? Give me an odds that it's going to be Kenny Gainwell. Give me, I think the Eagles like Kenny Gainwell more than people realize. Rashad Penny has the injury history. We all know he's talented, but it's tough to count on him. DeAndre Swift, guy's never run for more than 600. I think it's 17 yards was his top. It's not like he's a proven commodity. What are the odds Kenny Gainwell is the lead back on this team?
Well, I think they're probably pretty, I don't know, maybe 20% that he will be,
Jody's going smaller.
You're going smaller. Yeah, it could be smaller. I mean, you didn't bring Penny and Swift in here to, sit them behind Kenny Gainwell. You brought them in here to play a role. And Swift, listen, if I'm Gainwell, I'm a little concerned. I know he had his role grow last year, but, remember when training camp started in the preseason? I mean, Nick Sirianni was in Kenny Gainwell's face several times.
He had a bad regular season, but then he played well down the stretch.
Yeah, and Swift can catch the ball out of the backfield. That's one of his, really good traits, and that's what Kenny Gainwell does. So, I think they're going to use Swift and Penny, and they'll work Gainwell in, but Gainwell's going to have to earn his snaps because, like I said, they didn't bring Swift and Penny in here to, sit behind Kenny Gainwell. Or even Boston Scott. And I love Boston Scott. I mean, that guy just knows his role, and they don't play the Giants till later in the season.
What's Boston Scott going to do for the first 15 weeks of the season?
He's going to be the bodyguard for Jordan Mailata and all those other guys that he stands next to during your press conferences.
Yeah. I guess so. And by the way, I think Kenny Gainwell, because Miles Sanders cut the ball outside rather than ran it up in the first play of the Super Bowl, got a little bit more in the Super Bowl than he was supposed to get. John's been harping on that since Super Bowl Sunday, and I think he's right. Yeah, they got a little annoyed at Miles, and they turned to Kenny. Kenny didn't exactly lead the Eagles to victory in the Super Bowl either. I think people are overestimating what gains, pardon the pun, Kenny made at the end of the season. I think it's Swift or Penny. All right, Eddie Kracz, we kept you long enough. We appreciate it whenever you hop in. We hope you enjoyed your downtime because we like.
I hope you get some rest, man. It sounded like you're going through
rest. I thought he was on vacay.
Nah, he's doing hikes. He's going to Yosemite.
I was in Yosemite Park hiking 8 miles one day.
8 miles, yeah.
2,000 feet to 6,000 feet elevation.
Did you have like 60 pounds of gear strapped in too?
It was most challenging.
Who did you go on this hike with?
My son.
How old is your son?
He'll be 27 in June.
Damn.
I had him when I was 15. That tells you. My son, his girlfriend, and my wife, who is just a couple years younger.
Your wife did it. So you're tired, but your wife's fine. Suck it up, Kracz. Get the job done.
Yeah, what can I tell you? She's
by the way, Ed's second most difficult hike is from the Eagles Media House to the NovaCare Complex Auditorium. That is a treacherous hike, by the way.
Especially when it's raining. Those puddles collect on the sidewalk and you can't see them at night. You're stepping in them. Your feet are getting soaked. I don't think people realize that,
treacherous.
The trials and tribulations of Eagle Beat guys. Yeah, right. Eddie, good stuff. We'll get you up again in a couple weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ed.
Special Ed here with us on Birds 365. All right, we're coming back. Got to put a bow on the show. We're running out of time here on Birds 365.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire